Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Mason Knight, and this is the first edition of the High Side Productions YouTube page 5-minute reviews. And my first movie that I picked this week is Apostle on Netflix. It's actually a Netflix original. This movie released October 12th, so I'm kind of behind the game. But for the first one, I figured I would do this movie because I saw it on Netflix and I was like, hey, why not? It looks really interesting. It's kind of a horror fantasy movie, so I said, let's review it. All right, let's jump right in. Apostle, written and directed by Gareth Evans, starring Dave Stevensons, Michael Sheen, Richard Iflin, Paul Higgins, and Marcus Lewis-Jones. Now, the synopsis for this film is set in London in 1905. The prodigal son, Thomas Richardson, has returned home only to learn that his sister is being held for ransom by a religious cult. Determined to get her back at any cost, Thomas travels to the idyllic island where the cult lives. As Thomas infiltrates the island's community, he learns that the corruption of mainland society that they claim to reject has infested the cult's ranks nonetheless. He uncovers a secret more evil than he could have ever imagined. Dun dun dun. Now, things I liked about this movie. First and foremost, the director, I was extremely impressed with the way the director not only wrote the film, but also directed it. I really love when directors show us things instead of telling us through the dialogue. And one thing you'll find in this movie is that the symbolism throughout this movie is really something astonishing. I mean, if you go back, you can find easily 80 or 90 like different like small little Easter eggs throughout this film that really coincide with the film, that make it super enjoyable for those film goers who like to pick out little details in film, kind of in a very unique way. I found it really awesome. One of those examples is how he kind of shows us more than tells us, is that Thomas is kind of actually like the Christ-like figure in this film. But ironically enough, he actually loses his faith in believing in some sort of deity. And if you actually look into the Bible as well, like with Jesus, he had a disciple that after Jesus was crucified, Thomas was the only disciple that didn't believe Jesus was alive until he actually saw him. So I found that was really awesome that the director was able to put those sort of instances in the film in really subtle ways that I definitely appreciated. And again, I love it when directors choose to show you instead of tell you in the dialogue. Another highlight for this film was the acting and dialogue. A key part for me was definitely the believability of the actors portraying these characters. Even with the cult leaders who were, the antagonists of the film, the quote-unquote bad guys, I still got a great understanding of where they were coming from and why they were in this cult. Though, obviously, personally, I wouldn't agree with it, but I definitely saw their motives, which is really hard to do with bad guys. And I also found myself extremely invested in Dan Stevens' character. He played Thomas Richardson, though in the first two acts of this film actually are a really slow burning film to kind of lead up to the third act. But at no point in this movie did I feel like this film was dragging. I was constantly involved in wondering what was going on and what was going to happen next. And the movie also does a good job of really giving us partial information, but always that lingering question of, okay, what in the hell's going on here? I was also extremely impressed with that kind of mix, and I believe it only built with the suspense throughout the film in the first two acts leading up to the third. So if you like slow burners, you will like this film because the character development was really good, and it kept me intrigued the entire time. One of the side notes of this film, too, that I also really appreciated was the fight choreography. But the choreograph was amazing for this. It was super grounded and based in reality. And with a movie like this, you never know what characters are going to die because it is realistic in sort of that sense. Now, moving on, obviously with any movie, we have a lot of things that we like about the film, and then we have some things that we don't necessarily like about the film. I really don't have much to say bad about this film, other than I felt that we almost didn't need the horror fantasy element that we really saw in the third act. The writer did a great job of tying it all together, and it all made sense, so I'm not critiquing that. Just necessarily that I almost thought this movie was good enough, just with the rescue mission-esque kind of movie, like Thomas going and saving his sister from this crazy cult on some other island. I almost thought like that in itself was an original idea that I really liked to see. And then we added kind of these horror fantasy elements of like, it was a little much for me. I almost could have liked a more simplistic version of this movie. Not that I didn't like the ending, and again, he ties it into a lot of religious beliefs and stuff, so it was cool. But for me, I felt like we almost could have just done the rescue story and that would have been enough. With that said, what is my grade for this film? I'm going to be honest with you guys. I thought this was one of the best Netflix originals I've seen on Netflix. Netflix does this thing where they have really great TV shows, but for whatever reason, their movies are severely lacking in just being good. But for this one, that was definitely not the case. For me, I gave this movie a B+. And would I recommend this film? Absolutely. Go and check out The Apostle. It's just called Apostle. It's on Netflix, and leave a comment below, like the video, let me know what you guys think, and until next time.